So first of all, thank you for inviting me to the HagueTalks. So I'm Mary. I'm a professor of cyberanalytics, and I'm a cyberpsychologist and the director of the RCSI Cyberpsychology Research Center. So the first question is, what is cyberpsychology? Cyberpsychology is the study of the impact of technology on humans. And effectively, it's a part of applied psychology. And effectively, it's about 15 years old as a discipline. Now, I originally studied psychology back in the day. And when I first came across artificial intelligence in the 90s, I was fascinated. I thought, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. We could use it with children. We could do lots of different things. And then almost simultaneously, I stopped and I thought, my goodness, there is nothing in my training in psychology that equips me to understand the impact of this technology on people. So I started looking around, looking at the literature, and I came across cyberpsychology, early 2000s. And everybody told me the internet wasn't going to last, social media would never take off, and here we are. So my research areas, I specialized in forensic cyberpsychology. So forensic cyberpsychology looks at, if we think about forensic science, that's the physical evidence at a crime scene. In a television show, that would be CSI Las Vegas. If we think about forensic psychology, that's the behavioral evidence at a crime scene. So that would be criminal minds, what we call the blood spatter of the mind. My area is forensic cyberpsychology, which is criminality manifested in a virtual context. If anybody can repeat that, you'll get a prize. So basically, what I do is I look at state and trait behaviors manifested in a virtual context. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is the construct of cyberspace. This is a paradigm shift. The internet is not it's not the telephone. We're not talking about two cans and a piece of string. This is an engaging and psychologically immersive environment. And effectively, we can look at the online disinhibition effect. And these constructs come from cyberpsychology, anonymity online, immersion online. I say to parents, if you're worried about your kids turning up at the dinner table with their mobile phone in their hands, wait 2 or 3 years when they turn up with HMDUs, head-mounted display units. That's what they will sit down and have dinner wearing. So the point is that technology keeps evolving, and I am absolutely pro-technology. As a behavioral scientist, as a researcher, I could not work the way that I work without technology. I see the incredible advantages that it offers, but I also, from a forensic point of view, look at negative aspects and look at risk. The thing about technology and the internet per se is that it opens up the world to your child. It also exposes children to the world. And tonight I'm going to talk about exposing them to content online. So just going back a year or two ago, I was in the US, and we had been filming an extract for a television show. And one of the cameramen, as they were wrapping up, came over to me and they said, could I have a word with you for a minute? And I'm quite used to that. People come up after you've done something, they'll say, can I chat? And he said, something terrible happened to my son. So I said, oh my goodness, was it an accident, an illness? What's wrong? And he said, well, my son went into our bedroom and logged onto our computer and actually went online and spent about 30 or 40 minutes viewing hardcore pornography. And he said, my son was very upset afterwards, months of crying at night and waking and being distressed and asking all sorts of questions about, is that really what mommy and daddy do? And that child was 6 years of age. So it stopped me in my tracks to think, my goodness, as a society, how have we got to a point where we are pipelining this content to children? When did that become okay? And you can talk about parental controls. I object to parents being made almost exclusively responsible for children in cyberspace. In an age of ubiquitous technology, how can parents possibly protect their children? And when it comes to parental controls, I don't know one 11-year-old who doesn't know how to bypass them. I hate to break it to you. And if they don't know how to do it, their friends can. And when your child is going for a sleepover, you don't need to ask, are the parents there, or is there a dog that needs to be locked up? You need to ask about who's watching the internet in that house. Because you can protect your child at home, but what happens when they go somewhere else? So, following this episode, it really made me think about something that almost, I suppose, we've sort of taken for granted. All of this content being generated and shared. The internet was designed to share, absolutely to share. But we're sharing everything and with every age group. Now, when I talk about children, I mean, the definition of a child or the definition of minor, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, can be 18. I'm talking really about children under the age of 13 or 14, that sort of age group and down, and the content they're exposed to. So I felt so strongly about it, I started talking to academics in Ireland, and eventually I became a part of a group called the Internet Content Governance Group. Terrible title, but good intentions. And effectively, we were looking at this interesting area. It's legal, but age inappropriate content online. Now, what does that mean? It means hardcore adult pornography. It means extreme violent videos, beheading, immolation, torture. It means self-harm sites. The point at which a distressed 11-year-old girl sits down and types and puts the word thin into search and is led to the extreme sites that promote starvation. Who is ethically responsible for that? It's not the algorithm. They don't know doesn't know it's dealing with an 11-year-old. But by the time that child ends up in the grip of an eating disorder, supported by a whole cohort of people online, how do we undo that? Michael Cito, the great Canadian forensic psychologist, has said, we are living through the largest unregulated social experiment of all time, a generation of kids who've been exposed to extreme content online. Now, in terms of extreme content, I work with Europol. I'm the academic advisor in psychology to Europol, and I'm also an observer to the Interpol Specialist Group for Crimes Against Children. And if I can remain optimistic about the internet, believe me, anybody can. Because within these groups, we see the worst excesses of technology. And within that, in terms of what children are exposed to, we're not talking about crime. We're talking about legal content that is available online. But within these specialist groups, we see seasoned analysts who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of looking at extreme content, as a result of looking at extreme images. We're beginning to see early reports of post-traumatic stress disorder in the content moderators working in the Philippines for $300 a month, working for social network companies 8 to 10 hours a day, taking down child pornography, adult pornography, taking down extreme torture, taking down videos that are well, we're all familiar with what they are. So we're seeing post-traumatic stress disorder in that group. It's not a stretch to imagine that children will begin to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of looking at the content. Now, I can see in the group here we've got a wide age range, but I would say to younger members of the group, one thing, there is no command delete file for the brain. What is seen cannot be unseen. Be very, very careful at what you look at online. If somebody comes to share something, don't just expose yourself to it. So, how do we fix it? My approach is that this is a collective responsibility. It's too easy, it's facile just to say parents are responsible for what their children do. If a child is exposed to this content, to me, that is an abuse of the child. And who is responsible for that? A child has a right to childhood. A child has a right to innocence. How can they maintain that when they're looking at these extreme images? And if we're talking about the developed world, at least we've got some resources, or helplines, or hotlines, or social workers that actually could help the children. What about the developing world? They're going to jump straight to very sophisticated technology, but no resources to actually help or to protect children in this way. So effectively, whether it's the caregiver of the child, whether it's the device manufacturer, or the internet service provider, or the website that hosts the content, or the entity that generates the content, all of them are involved in the abuse of a child if a child accesses information. And guess what? Some of them are actually making money from the abuse of a child. So if we think about this, we're here, a UN forum to actually celebrate 70 years, the HagueTalks. If we think about Article 19 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Children, effectively it says that authorities are responsible for ensuring the healthy mental and physical development of the child. Exposure to this legal but extreme content impacts on the positive mental health of the child. And specifically, in terms of Sustainable Development Goal number 16.2 to be exact, it also refers to protecting children from abuse. So let's think about it in a real-world construct. If we were to walk into a newsagent and see the bottom shelf lined with extreme content, lined with adult pornography, lined with torture magazines, lined with self-harm guides, and we saw children thumbing through them, would we be concerned about that? But effectively, this is what's happening online. So what I would like to do is actually to use this platform, this working group here, to actually call for an amendment to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, to actually bring that convention, which was formulated in 1989, to bring it into an age of technology where we can actually incorporate the rights of a child in a cyber context, or the cyber rights of a child. And the point is that if we think about cyberspace as a place, this is real world society. But what happens in cyber society impacts on the real world. What happens in the real world impacts on cyber society. It takes a village to raise a child. And this too is true in cyberspace. And if we think about cyberspace as a continuum, as a place, on the far left of the continuum, you have the keyboard warriors, the freedom of the internet brigade, the freedom, rights, whatever, and that's all good. That's all good. You can have perfect freedom to express yourself online. And the motive to keep the internet unregulated and free from any sort of too strict controls, the motive is one of it's an idealism, and that's fine. Everybody is entitled to that belief. And on the far right, we have industry. And industry also have a motive in terms of not having too much regulation or too much governance. But the motive there is profit, because it's expensive to do so. And the rest of us, the 99.9% of us and our children, we live in the center, in between these two motives, effectively. When do we get a chance to have a say about what happens in cyberspace? And yes, everybody is entitled to their rights, but not at any cost, and not at the cost of the rights of a child. Thank you.